The evening sky glittered above Lakeview Heights, its horizon soaked in warm amber light. Inside a modest reception hall, music swayed like soft wine through glass. The air held laughter, perfume, and the scent of celebration. A young woman named Lucia Vega danced barefoot across the wooden floor, her silver dress catching the glow of chandeliers. Around her, guests cheered, clapping in rhythm, believing they were witnessing the beginning of a perfect story. Lucia had spent years chasing stability after hardship, raising 2 children alone, working long hours, hoping for a chance at peace. That night, she thought she had found it in Alejandro Rivas, the man standing proudly beside her, sharp in a tailored suit, smiling with confidence that made him magnetic. Together they looked like a promise. 2 people choosing love after storms. The music rose and fell. Glasses clinked in toast after toast. Words like forever and faith filled the room. But sometimes, forever is shorter than anyone dares to imagine. Beneath the laughter, a shadow had already begun to stir. When the celebration ended and the lights dimmed, Alejandro guided Lucia toward his black Maserati. The streets outside shimmered under the rain. As they drove through the city, silence settled between them. The rhythm of the wipers was the only sound that dared interrupt it. Love, in its purest form, is a mirror. It shows what people wish to hide. And in that silence, Alejandro's reflection was no longer charming. It was restless, cold, and heavy with control. Lucia looked out the window, unaware that this car ride, meant to carry them toward a new life, was instead the prelude to tragedy. The Maserati glided through wet streets and slipped into the underground garage of Lucia's apartment complex. Surveillance cameras caught 2 silhouettes stepping out, hers light and hesitant, his firm and rigid. They entered the elevator together. That would be the last time anyone saw Lucia Vega alive. The morning sun arrived indifferent to loss. Its warmth touched every window except one. Calls went unanswered. Messages piled up. By midday, Lucia's sister began to worry. By evening, fear had taken its place. When her family finally entered the apartment, silence greeted them first. Then came the discovery that turned joy into mourning. Lucia lay motionless, the silver of her dress dulled by death. The bathtub gleamed faintly beside her, the air thick with the scent of iron and disbelief. What had once been a home now stood as a scene of betrayal. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, only a single truth. She had trusted the person who ended her life. The investigation unfolded quickly. Detectives combed through every inch of the apartment. They found no weapon, no witnesses, no footprints leading out. But the Maserati, the sleek black symbol of luxury and pride, was gone. So was Alejandro. Within days, a lead surfaced. The missing car was discovered in the garage of Alejandro's brother, Humberto Rivas, hidden beneath a tarp. Faint traces of blood still visible along the seams of the passenger seat. Bleach had been poured carelessly, the smell still lingering like confession. The evidence told a story that words could not deny. Authorities questioned Humberto, who spoke little and revealed less, but his silence carried weight. Family, once a bond, had become complicity. The truth was spreading faster than loyalty could contain it. From that point, the trail led south. Credit cards went cold. Cameras caught fleeting glimpses along the highway, first near Arkansas, then Houston, and finally across the border into Hidalgo, Mexico, where the digital trail vanished completely. The man who once smiled for wedding photos disappeared into dust. Rumors surfaced in small border towns. Stories of a stranger who paid in cash, avoided eye contact, and kept to himself. He changed names often, towns even more. No one ever knew his past, and he made sure of it. Yet guilt does not sleep. Every reflection in every mirror showed him what he had tried to erase. Every night carried whispers of the life he took. The FBI called him the man who vanished into air. Posters faded on walls, and time dulled outrage, but justice is patient. It waits quietly until the world turns its back. Then it strikes. Back in Lakeview Heights, grief turned into ritual. Lucia's sister kept a candle burning at her porch every night. The flame flickered softly beside a framed photograph, the image of a woman smiling in silver. Her daughter sometimes asked why the picture showed her mother with wings. There was never a simple answer. Each year, on the anniversary, neighbors gathered in silence. They whispered the same prayer beneath the glow of streetlights. May justice find him before forgiveness does. 7 years passed. Seasons came and went, but the name Alejandro Rivas refused to fade. In 2019, federal authorities placed him on the top 10 most wanted list. His face returned to every screen, his smirk frozen in defiance. A reward of $250,000 stood beside it, an invitation for truth to rise again. The world kept moving, but time was slowly circling back. In late 2024, a construction worker near Monterey fit the description. Middle-aged, heavier, graying beard, a foreign accent disguised poorly. An undercover team began to watch. They followed him from markets to work sites, from quiet bars to an isolated apartment on the edge of town. Every morning he rose before dawn. Every night he looked over his shoulder before turning the key. The rhythm of guilt had become his only routine. In January 2025, movement began at first light. Armored vehicles rolled quietly through Monterey's narrow streets. Radios murmured, hearts steadied, fingers hovered over triggers. Inside a small courtyard, the man they hunted sipped his morning coffee, unaware that his years of running were already over. The convoy stopped at the edge of the street. Doors opened. Shadows moved fast and silent. By the time he looked up, the past was already standing before him. Uniformed, armed, and relentless. After 7 years, the circle had closed. Justice does not rush. It endures. Love once betrayed becomes the sharpest memory. Respect once taken for granted becomes the only thing left to beg for. Lucia Vega's name will be remembered not for the way she died, but for the lesson her story carved into time. You can run from law, from people, from consequence, but not from truth. What begins with deceit always ends with reckoning. Every injustice hides behind silence until justice decides to speak. The streets of Lakeview Heights slept under a gray sky that did not know peace. It had been 3 days since the wedding that became a whisper of tragedy. In a small apartment where laughter once echoed, the silver dress still hung on a chair, its fabric dulled by shadow. The air was heavy, unmoving, as if holding its breath, waiting for someone to walk in and set time back to normal. But no one came. The world outside had moved on. Inside, silence had settled like a ghost. Police tape soon stretched across the door. The neighbors whispered in stairwells, trading theories like gossip, unsure how to speak about love turned into loss. No one could understand how the joy of 2 lives joining could dissolve into this. No one could believe that Alejandro Rivas, the man who smiled in every photo, the man who toasted it forever, could simply vanish. By morning, detectives stood in the apartment. Their voices echoed softly off the tile. There's no sign of forced entry. One said, "Whoever did this, she knew him." Another replied. In the corner of the room, a wedding photo stared back at them. 2 smiles, 2 promises, 1 lie buried between them. The bathtub told the rest. The news spread like wildfire. Newlywed found dead. The headlines read. Pictures of Lucia Vega in her silver dress flashed across screens and phones. Friends wept. Strangers gasped. And somewhere across the border, a man drove in silence, his reflection flickering in the rear-view mirror. Alejandro didn't look back. Every few miles, he checked his phone. No service. He'd turned it off long ago, but paranoia whispered through every vibration of the car. Each time he saw headlights behind him, his pulse jumped. The hum of the road became his only companion, a dull reminder that the further he went, the smaller his world became. Days passed. He drove through rain, through night, through the exhaustion that clung to his bones. Somewhere past Houston, his fuel light flicked on. He stopped at a gas station off the interstate, the kind where the lights flickered and flies circled the pumps. Inside, a tired clerk asked no questions. Alejandro handed over cash, eyes down, voice low. Then, for a brief second, he saw a news headline playing on the small TV behind the counter. Wife found dead after wedding night. Husband missing. He turned away, but the image burned in his mind. Lucia's face, The same photo they'd taken hours before it all fell apart. For a moment, his hands trembled. He clenched his jaw and forced them still. "Keep driving," he whispered to himself. And so he did, back in Lakeview Heights. Detectives began to trace the invisible trail. A phone ping here, a bank card swipe there, a Maserati seen on a camera, sleek, black, and fast. It was a ghost story written in digital ink, and every breadcrumb led further south. By the time they reached Texas, the trail had grown faint, but someone was still watching. The bureau stepped in, files stacking, photos pinned across cork boards, maps with red strings and timelines scribbled in ink. The name Alejandro Rivas sat in bold letters, underlined twice. Meanwhile, across the border, Alejandro had disappeared into another world. He traded his jacket for an old shirt, his car for silence, his name for survival. He crossed through dirt roads and small towns where no one asked questions and everyone owed someone a favor. He became just another face under the sun, blending into crowds, paying cash, leaving no trace. At night, he would lie awake under the ceiling fan, watching its slow, endless spin. Each rotation reminded him of time, circling back to the moment he couldn't undo. Sometimes he would hear her voice, faint, like an echo underwater. "Why, Alejandro? Why couldn't love be enough?" He never answered, maybe because deep down he didn't know either. Months turned to years. His face appeared on wanted posters, first in Illinois, then across the country. Eventually, one morning, it appeared on television screens worldwide. The FBI has added Alejandro Rivas to its 10 most wanted list. The announcer said, her tone calm but chilling. A photo of him, smiling, confident, unaware, filled the screen. A reward was offered, a number to call, a promise. Justice never forgets. In the quiet of a dusty bar in Durango, a man in a corner booth looked up at the screen, then down at his beer. Alejandro turned away, but inside, his world began to shrink again. Q, back in the U.S., his brother carried secrets like stones in his chest. He knew more than he told the police. They could see it in his eyes. When they raided his garage months later, the air smelled of oil and fear. Under a dusty tarp, they found the Maserati. The seats were stained. The evidence undeniable. The brother said little, but the silence spoke volumes. From that day on, the case turned from tragedy to obsession. Every agent who saw the file knew the story. The wedding, the fight, the flight. It became a haunting, the one that wouldn't rest until justice returned home. Years drifted by. Technology changed. Agents retired. New ones joined. But the file stayed open. The photo never moved. Every few months, a whisper would surface. He's in Reynosa. He's in Durango. He's gone for good. And each time, a new investigator would reopen the case, chasing shadows. But fate, like truth, has a way of catching up when the world least expects it. Scene fades into the year 2025. A humid dawn in Monterey. A small house at the edge of town. Inside, a man in his 40s stood by a cracked window, staring at the skyline. He'd grown a beard. His eyes were hollow. But the guilt had never aged. It had only grown heavier. Down the street, 2 unmarked cars rolled in quietly. A knock echoed on the front door. "Senor Rivas?" No answer. A second knock, harder this time. Then the door burst open. In less than 2 minutes, it was over. The man who'd vanished into silence for nearly 13 years was finally in handcuffs. The neighborhood watched as he was led into the morning light. For the first time in years, Alejandro looked up at the sky. Not as a free man, but as someone who had run out of road. And yet, something in his eyes said it wasn't over. Because somewhere between guilt and truth, another story was waiting to be told. Low ambient strings fade in. The narrator's voice remained steady, deliberate. Every word weighted with consequence. For 13 years, Alejandro Rivas lived inside a prison that had no bars. He had crossed oceans of dust and silence, traded names like loose coins, and built walls out of secrets so high that even his conscience could barely climb them. But guilt is patient. It doesn't shout. It whispers. And in the quiet, its voice is the loudest sound of all. The years after that night passed like smoke through his hands. He moved from one rented room to another, never long enough to be remembered, never loud enough to be noticed. Sometimes he worked odd jobs, fixing roofs, digging wells, mixing cement under the punishing Mexican sun. Other times, he disappeared completely, vanishing into mountain towns where strangers stayed strangers. At first, he believed distance would save him. That time would bury the truth, the way sand buries footprints. But every sunset brought a shadow shaped like regret. In Durango, he once lived above a butcher shop. The air always smelled of salt and iron. At night, he'd sit on the balcony, watching the streets below. Children would play soccer barefoot, their laughter rising with the dusk. He'd stare at them until the noise blurred into memory, remembering another home, another child calling him Papa before everything turned red. Some nights, he drank to forget. Other nights, he drank to remember, as if reliving the pain was the only way to stay human. Meanwhile, across the border, the story refused to die. Each anniversary of Lucia Vega's death brought new headlines. Reporters retold the same story: the wedding, the dress, the silence that followed. Her family never stopped searching, not for him, but for closure. One of them once told a journalist, "Forgiveness doesn't come from knowing where he is. It comes from knowing he can't hurt anyone else." That line echoed in newsrooms, in living rooms, in the hearts of people who had never met her. The world hadn't forgotten, even if Alejandro tried to. In 2019, his photo resurfaced again. The FBI placed him among their 10 most wanted. A black and white image of him at 30, hair short, eyes steady, unaware of what time would do. A $250,000 reward was announced. For a moment, his name returned to every headline. His face appeared on screens he would never dare to look at. But far away, in a small town near Santiago Papasquiaro, a man who called himself Miguel Alvarez looked up from his dinner and turned the volume down. His pulse quickened. He shut the windows, locked the doors, and didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he shaved his beard and packed a single bag. By dusk, he was on a bus heading east to Reynosa near the border. He told himself it was precaution, but deep down it was fear. He had run for so long that running had become his only way of breathing. Over the next few years, he lived under false names, sometimes working as a driver, sometimes as a handyman. People liked him. He was polite, punctual, quiet. They never guessed who he really was. In photos taken by those who met him, he looked almost ordinary. But in his eyes, if one looked closely, there was always distance, as if he was somewhere else entirely. He avoided churches, avoided weddings, avoided anything that reminded him of promises. He told himself that life was survival now, not redemption. But fate never bargains. It collects. In Chicago, Agent Delgado, who had inherited the Rivas case, reopened the file. He was young when the murder happened. Now, he was one of the Bureau's most relentless investigators. He saw the case not as a statistic, but as an unfinished story. "He's alive," Delgado would say during briefings. They always resurface. Guilt always leaks. He re-examined every trace, every family tie, every friend left behind. Then he found something: wire transfers. Small amounts, sent irregularly, from a man in Tamaulipas to a woman in Durango. Different names, but the handwriting on the forms looked familiar. It wasn't proof, but it was a heartbeat. Weeks turned into months of quiet surveillance. Every whisper mattered. Every rumor was mapped. By late 2024, the trail pointed to Monterrey, a bustling city where no one looked twice at a stranger. That's where they found him, in a modest home on the edge of the city. Neighbors said Miguel Alvarez was a good man, polite, paid his rent on time, kept to himself. He lived alone, worked odd jobs, and never caused trouble. But one neighbor remembered something peculiar. Every year, on May 12th, he would stay indoors all day. No visitors, no lights, just silence. That silence told investigators everything they needed to know. In January 2025, surveillance tightened. Plain cars watched the street. A single mistake was all they needed. It came in the form of a package, a small box from Durango, mailed under a familiar hand. The return address was all the confirmation they needed. On January 30th, as dawn rose over Monterey, the operation began. Agents surrounded the block, their radios crackling softly. One knocked on the door. Senor Alvarez, federal authorities. Silence, then movement. A window creaked upstairs, a shadow shifting. Before he could slip away, the door burst open. Inside, they found him standing still as if waiting. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't speak. He simply nodded, like a man who had rehearsed this moment in his head for years. "Are you Alejandro Rivas?" A pause. "Yes," he said quietly. "It's over." When they placed the cuffs on him, he didn't resist. His expression wasn't anger or fear. It was relief. Neighbors gathered outside, murmuring in disbelief. To them, he had been invisible, a man of few words and quiet manners. They never imagined he had carried a ghost inside him all this time. At the local station, he sat in a small interrogation room. The air conditioner hummed. Across from him, Agent Delgado set down a folder thick with years of unanswered questions. "You've been running for 13 years, Delgado said. "Why stop now?" Alejandro looked up slowly, his eyes distant. "I didn't stop," he said. "Time did." That night, as paperwork was filed and reports transmitted, the city outside continued its ordinary rhythm. People laughing, traffic honking, life moving on. But in that small, fluorescent-lit room, the weight of a decade finally exhaled. Alejandro closed his eyes. For the first time, he wasn't looking over his shoulder. Yet somewhere deep in the quiet corners of his mind, something stirred, something unfinished. A secret not yet spoken. A truth no one had asked the right question for. And when he finally whispered, "There's more you don't know," the room went still.